Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Grcevich, and I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Key Ministry. And I am delighted to invite everyone here in the United States and worldwide to our initial March 2014 Inclusion Fusion Disability Ministry Web Symposium. And we are very honored to have as our guest for this month, Nils Smith. Nils is the web pastor for Community Bible Church in San Antonio, Texas. They have a very robust online church that is serving approximately 16,000 people a week in 400 different cities and countries around the world. In addition to his work as a web pastor at CBC, Nils is involved in a number of different ventures. He is doing some work for Life Without Limbs and helping to support the online presence of the ministry of Nick Vujicic. In addition, he is doing some consulting work for us at Key Ministry. And he has written a book looking specifically at the social media guide for ministry that is available through group publishing as well as on Amazon.com, that I've read personally and strongly recommend to any church where you have leaders or pastors or elders who are looking for a clear and concise summary of how social media can be most effectively used in ministry. So we are honored to have Nils today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about a question that comes up or has come up with us when we've been exploring ways of using technology to connect families who have kids with disabilities with churches that are willing and prepared to be able to serve and welcome and include them, which is a whole question as to whether online community is real community. So, Nils, thanks so much for joining us today. You know, we're very honored to have you.
I appreciate it, Steve, and I appreciate the introduction.
Well, I guess maybe a good place to start would be to ask you, how did you end up becoming a web pastor? What got you interested in this area, or how were you qualified for this? And tell us a little bit about like your role, at CBC and what you've discovered in terms of using the internet as a resource for being able to build community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say my role, I don't know that there are qualifications for a role like this. But how I got started really began in 1999 when I was a youth pastor. I'd actually just become a Christian. I had my first ministry role as a youth pastor at a church as a summer intern. And I talk about having two key ministry tools at my disposal, and that was the 15-passenger church van, which is now outlawed because insurance purposes, and probably because of 19-year-olds like me driving them. And then church computer. They had one computer and had dial-up internet. But what I found with those two tools is I was able to use them to personally connect with teenagers in a very real way, in a physical way. Through the church van, I would pick kids up. We'd go bowling. We'd go putt-putt. We'd build relationships, and then we'd interact on AOL Instant Messenger. And so that's where teenagers were interfacing, interacting, and I was unaware. That this was actually, I think, before I was using email. I was using AOL Instant Messenger, and teenagers were on there. They were connecting with each other, and what they were doing is they would introduce me then to their friends, and then we'd pick them up in the church van the next day, and they would join us at the swimming pool or whatever social event we're having. But I quickly began to see, even that was, I guess, 15 years ago, that very real relationships were being built online, and it wasn't just shallow conversations. We were having spiritual conversations on AOL Instant Messenger, and then MySpace came along, and I was a youth pastor for 10 years, and so I began to connect with teenagers on MySpace, and there's a big debate of, I see the unhealthy interactions that are happening here, yet there was also, that's where they were, and that's where they were engaging, connecting, so I felt like I needed to be involved and engaged where they were. And we found a lot of value in that. And then Facebook, I feel like changed everything from a social perspective, because that's where it stopped just being a teenager thing, and that's where it became all demographics, all generations, and not just even the United States, globally. So at Community Bible Church, we really took Facebook has 1 billion people actively using that network, and we said, how can we engage that audience? And so we want to reach, teach, and help people in San Antonio, but we're limited by geography until we went on the internet. And then the internet broke down those geographic barriers and has allowed us to connect with people all over the world. And so that's how we're able essentially to have church with people from 150 different countries every week, because anyone from anywhere can connect and engage with us. And I would say, just take the next step with it, is that as we took church on the internet, so we streamed our services and we created a chat room where people can chat through Facebook. We found that it is very much church, and I say church, it's a community and gathering of believers, and so it is a social experience. So it's not a bunch of people getting together and watching TV at the same time. It's people getting together and having fellowship and having discipleship and praying for each other, and really experiencing biblical community together. And honestly, we take communion together. We do a lot of. We just do church together on the internet. We use Facebook as our key social network to connect.
Well, if you could talk a little bit more about that, because as you know, we're going to start to share in the next couple of weeks some of the things that you've been helping us out with in terms of creating opportunities to use online church to help families impacted by disability to connect with churches, presumably in their local communities, so that eventually they can worship in the physical presence of other Christ followers.
Right.
But we've gotten tremendous pushback from some folks who insist that online church can't be real church. And so if you could maybe share a little bit about, what your experience has been with this, and, how the relationships that people form through your online platform, are God-honoring and help to promote discipleship in the same way that they would if they were gathering together like on your physical campus in San Antonio.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think about the first time that we did an online service, what we essentially did is we took our weekend worship service, we uploaded it to Media Social, the platform we use, we put play, it was our executive team, our pastoral team, updated their Facebook statuses, and we had 400 people that saw that status, clicked the link, and joined us. And what we saw is that people were praying for each other. People were sharing needs. I remember one of my former youth ministry students from another city logged in and had a transformational experience that night and was in a chat room telling me about it. And we experienced church. And I remember afterwards our pastor said, "Is this church?" And everyone in there said, "Well, yeah, from what we know church to be, this is church." And he said, "Was this something we want to invest in?" And I said, "Absolutely. Let's see where God could take this." So we kind of have figured it out one step at a time. We never thought we would do communion online, and we've experimented and done that. We haven't done a baptism online, but we think we will. We started doing, but even as people started getting online and they started accepting Christ, we said, "What do we do now?" And so we said, "Well, what do we do with them here at our physical church?" Well, we get them connected in small groups. So we started creating small groups online. And so we use Facebook groups as a way, or Google Hangouts, as a way for people to get online and have Bible study and fellowship. So we naturally have just kind of navigated church and how that works on the internet. But I would say what really makes it real for me are the individual lives that we've connected with. And so I think about, there's one gentleman, his name is Jim, and it's one of my favorite stories. He's in Canada, and he thought he was logging a Canadian broadcasting channel because it was CBC online. And he really connected with our community. Wasn't a believer, hadn't been to church since he was a teenager. He was now 65 years old. Started asking questions, and 2 months after he first logged into CBC online, he became a Christian, and now he's one of our leaders. And he's highly engaged. Still doesn't go to a physical church because of some of the scars that he has, but he's very much a member and participant in our church. He's actually planning on coming to San Antonio to get baptized and meet with us face to face.
That's awesome.
And stories like Jim's have become a norm for us. I think about, there's a girl, Holly, and she was a teenage girl, about 19 years old, 20 years old, grew up physically at CBC at our campus, but she needed a lung transplant. Had to be in the hospital in Dallas for about 3 months, and so for about 2 years She was in and out of hospitals, really couldn't physically come to church. She came a couple of times, and she had to wear a mask, able to meet her face to face. But I'll tell you, the community that was developed for her online, when she needed community more than ever, yet her family wasn't in Dallas, nobody was in Dallas. She talked about she was more connected to her church during those times in the hospital than she was when she was here. She ended up passing away about a year ago. And so many of us from online church, first time we met face to face was at Holly's funeral.
Wow.
And the community that we experienced, and how the church was able to go to her when she couldn't come to church is a powerful thing. And it transformed physical and digital community. And so they overlap. But I would say that in our world today, we call digital community virtual community as if it's not real. But my friendship with Holly, even though I only met her once or twice face to face, very real. My relationship with Jim, who's in Canada, who I've never met face to face, it's very real. And these relationships that are happening, and the community that's happening, and some of these stories are very intense. So some of these are, people are just finding another opportunity to worship. They go to church on the weekends, and they like to get online on Tuesday nights and have church and interact with their friends in Rwanda and their friends in Nepal and their friends in Kentucky. So it really transforms geographic barriers and allows for a global worshiping community. So it's pretty exciting, and so I just speak to it's very real.
I will share that from having been part of the online community at CBC, I have a pastor named Prem in Nepal who prays for me. And a week ago Saturday, I came home and I was dead sick and felt the flu coming on. And, he messaged, checking out my computer before I go to bed, he messages me anything I do, and he offered to pray for me because I thought I'd be too sick to go to church the next day. And my wife was quite surprised that I was hale and healthy at 7:30 in the morning. And, and to have somebody from halfway around the world spontaneously volunteering to do that was really cool. Yeah. Now, I want to move on. And related to this, one of the other criticisms that we've had is the concern that inviting people to have an experience of church online who have been impacted by disability could unintentionally reinforce the social isolation that they're currently experiencing. Because, one of our challenges as church in terms of trying to connect families up with churches is that, having a child who has symptoms of a mental illness or a parent with a mental illness becomes very socially isolating, and that they don't necessarily have the friends and the social connections that would result in them being invited to a bricks and mortar church. But there are people, say, throughout the disability ministry field who are concerned that by allowing them to do church online, it will actually be counterproductive in terms of allowing folks to be able to build genuine relationships where they live. And so I'm curious how you'd respond to that concern.
And I think in many ways it's a situation to situation need. I think a lot of it depends on leadership as well. So there are people that would say you can just do church online. I probably lean on the side of saying we're always going to encourage people to get connected in physical church community. We believe that it's the healthiest form of spiritual community, but we also know that for some people it's just not realistic, or it's that they have digital and physical spiritual community. So we have people that we minister to in Saudi Arabia that physically can't go to a church. We can't encourage them to go to a physical church when there isn't that option, and yet there are people here that live in our city. And I think about one of our hosts has Asperger's, really struggles in a social environment in his physical church. He is involved in physical face-to-face spiritual community, but he feels uncomfortable in that, so he almost forces himself. So the digital community for him is a great combination for his spiritual maturity and his spiritual growth and his connection with others. And so I think it's individual to individual in those circumstances. I think there's leadership challenges that we face as we go online and what we communicate to people and how we encourage them to what their next step is. So people can do. I mean, you can live most of your life on the internet now. You can order all your groceries on the internet. You can watch all your TV on the internet. You can work on the internet from home. You can do so much on the internet, and it can be very unhealthy. And you can do your spiritual life on the internet. You can go to church on the internet. You can be on a small group on the internet. We don't encourage that, but we do believe that digital spiritual community can be a very healthy thing in addition to physical connection in biblical community. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, in addition to what we're hoping to do with using online worship platforms to help to connect families and their communities to local churches, the reality is that we know that there are a lot of families that live in communities where there isn't a church yet that's prepared to be able to, welcome them, to worship together and to be parts of all of the other things that go into church, on their bricks and mortars campus.
Right.
And so through your work at CBC, as well as the consulting that you do with other folks who are doing church online, what's your experience been in seeing people who experience church this way starting their own house churches or using the online streaming and the online worship as a way of inviting, other friends or other families impacted by similar issues into online community around what you've produced at CBC or what other churches have produced where you've consulted or worked together with them?
Absolutely. And I think, Steve, this is a trend that is maybe happening a little bit now, but can happen more and more in the future because of the technology that exists. And so I think as we have an understanding of church, of it being a community, so church doesn't happen independently. And I think that's where the danger of doing online church exists. But when you talk about it being a place that people are gathered, that doesn't mean it has to be a big church building either. So having church in your house can be a very healthy thing and honestly a very biblical thing. I mean, I think we see that throughout the New Testament. And so with solid teaching resources and music resources, you can have a great worship experience with 5 or 6 people in your living room, and that's church. And I think for some families, that's going to be the most effective form of church for their family. So I think it really depends on your family, your family's needs. But I will say that there are resources available now to have church from wherever you are, whether that's on your smartphone, when you're on a family vacation or away at work, or whether that's on your living room TV with your friends and your next door neighbors. So there that opportunity exists. I don't know that it's happening a ton yet, but I think it is a great opportunity. Or if you're struggling as a family and saying, this just isn't working for us, you can essentially start a church. And it doesn't have to have this 501c3 structure that we envision church being. It can be much more organic than that.
Okay. One of the things that appealed to us, and one of the reasons why we reached out to you to help us with our online projects, is that CBC really offers a remarkable array of online groups. If you could talk a little bit about how you folks do your groups, and share a little, about how you would see that being a resource to, families who are impacted by disability and struggling to experience community.
Absolutely. And really that comes out of what we do physically at our church campus. And so we don't have, a great structure to how we do groups. Our pastor will often say, if you like bowling, get around a bunch of other bowlers and go bowling together, and then let's talk about Jesus a little bit, and that's a group. Or if you like knitting, do that. Or if you're available on Tuesday night and you like studying the Bible, we're going to have a Bible study that will gather in this room, and it's for all ages. And so we have a great diversity in our group offerings here at our physical campus. So I think we have 500 plus groups. That some are sports groups, some are just women's groups, some are just Bible studies, some are guitar playing groups that then discuss pray together afterwards. Or so we have a cooking a group of men that like to barbecue together, and that's a group. And honestly, they're having biblical community around that common interest. And so we see on the internet this is already happening, and so it's nothing that we are are really having to create. People have been connecting on the internet before church started doing it, around people that have dogs that live in Houston, Texas, in this area, or people that like cats, or people. Does that make sense? So there are affinity groups of people gathering and connecting on the internet already, and we said, why not just create Bible group, biblically based groups around either a common interest or a study. And so some of our groups we're going to study Andy Stanley's Guardrails series for 6 weeks, and you can start logging in, and we'll have a Bible study, or we'll have a cancer support group. And if you're impacted by cancer, whether you have cancer or somebody else has cancer, and so so we see different needs. And honestly, though, it's those affinity groups, it's those. And I would say especially those that are hurting from a cancer support group, or I think we have women that have been abused, and a lot of these are private groups that meet, but those common interests bring people together around biblical principles better than anything else that we found.
Well, moving on from there, I guess one of the other questions I'd raise is that there's been a lot of discussion in the church over the last 5 years. If you look at like the Reveal survey and some of the work that the guys from Willow Creek have done, looking at how effective we are as church at helping people to grow spiritually. How do you track that when people are doing church online? And is there any evidence, in fact, that people who, like these 16,000 people a week who are accessing CBC through your web campus, how do you know that that they're really and truly becoming disciples, and exhibiting the spiritual growth that you would hope that you would see from the people who are attending your bricks and mortars campus?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that we have these specific metrics of this is happening, and so we know that they've been in Bible study for this long, and there's a complex algorithm to how we're tracking it. But honestly, we don't own our physical campus either. We want our mission is to reach, teach, and help people in Jesus' name. And so we're going to track how many people accepted Christ, how many people got connected into a small group, how long people, how many people came to our worship service, and how long they stayed in our worship service. So we're counting as much as we can. But when it comes to measuring spiritual growth, it's very challenging for us to say this number, other than having more people in groups and that the retention rate is higher. I will say, though, one of the ways that we measure discipleship at CBC is through giving. And so we believe that if people are growing spiritually, God is going to convict them to give to their ministry. And we're a ministry that doesn't ever ask for people to donate. It's just a part of our DNA. I think our pastor heard men use the excuse of not going to church that all they want is my money, and so we're not going to ask for it. We're going to just speak into your life, speak truth into your life, and as you grow spiritually, God will convict that aspect. So we've seen giving increase significantly through our online ministry efforts, and so we believe that's a result of people connecting and growing spiritually.
Very cool. Now, one of the other things that's a struggle for a lot of the families that we would like to see connected with church, who have been impacted with a child with like a disability, mental illness, trauma, kids with developmental disabilities, is our belief that each member of those families, as well as the kids themselves, all have spiritual gifts and talents and abilities to contribute to the kingdom. How do you see people who are accessing church online being able to use this modality, or where the modality is a catalyst to them being able to use their gifts and talents in serving other people?
I think you get creative. I think it depends on the specific role. I think about the gentleman who volunteers with us that has Asperger's, that no one within our community would have any idea if he didn't talk about it, and that he's really able to serve our ministry, and he serves both as as a chat host and as a technical support guy because he's has strong technical skills, and and honestly, he's become a storyteller for us as well. He's a great writer. And so we've just found his gifts, just like we do at our physical church community. Is we see what someone's gifts are, and then we look at how can that translate to what we're doing. And because there isn't a precedent within online church for certain things, it can be challenging to be a little more creative because you haven't seen it happen before. One of the things we always talk about though is you can serve in your PJs with online church, so you don't have to get dressed and get up to church and stand at a door. The roles are different, and the truth is there are future roles, volunteer roles, service opportunities that we've yet to think of. And so I think as you meet people and you connect with them, just like you can in your physical church, but online, there's a role for everyone, and there's an opportunity for everyone to serve in some way.
Well, you were talking about how your career in ministry began as a youth pastor. And one of the things that I've noticed, like checking out other campuses online, is that it's fairly unusual for people to live stream the worship that they have for youth or for kids. And one of the things that we would hope to help our partner churches do is, realizing the social communication barriers when, a kid has difficulty being able to process body language, or tone or inflection of voice. Or like the struggle that, say, like a teenager with social anxiety has when ministry moves to, small group environments in people's homes and larger group environments. How would you envision this type of technology being used, not just to reach adults, but to reach kids and teens who have been impacted by disability, and allowing them to appreciate and to enjoy, church community as well?
I think it will be unique. I think we have a generation coming up, a digital generation that from, my 2-year-old can run my iPad. I mean, she can literally navigate all over it. She knows how to open the apps that she wants to open and view the videos that she wants to view. And so I think, and this is a guess, not having someone disabled in my home, but that often a disabled child might be more interactive online and might be even more engaged on an iPad and through those technologies. And I think one of the uniquenesses that someone disabled in those kind of environments is that they're almost that they can identify with each other differently or in a unique way that isn't as uncomfortable as it is in a physical setting, in a physical environment. And I think those interactions that as we know them, and so we understand normality in a physical interaction, and I think normality online is for I think those that are 40, 50 plus that are they live without a digital connection for a season. So I got a cell phone when I was 16 years old, and so I would say I'm almost a digital native because more than half my life I've been connected. And so connectivity and online interaction is more normal for me. And so I think for those that come up and their whole life will be digitally connected, there will be less divide between a digital space and a physical space. So having an online group or even having a physical group that has an online component will be natural. And I don't know how that will for some of those disabled. I don't know whether that will help them to be more comfortable, more engaged. And I don't know that anyone can really predict that, but I think that they will be more adjusted to that, and I think others will be more adjusted to that as well, making it a more natural connection. Does that make sense to answer your question?
Any thoughts on why there haven't been more churches that have put more of their youth ministry online up to now, given how easy it's becoming in terms of, is the cost of the technology to produce it and, the web platforms to host it have come down?
There's a number of factors. I think one is churches are fearful of new technologies. And then naturally you have a lot of liabilities with minors, and so liabilities with anything that might have a minor's, on a screen or on video, as well as, you hear concerns about, or I've heard a lot of concerns about you're creating an opportunity that would be attractive for a pedophile to come and engage. And naturally that's social media. And pedophiles know how to connect with teenagers online. Mm-hmm. My opinion is that the church, you can create safeguards for that. You can actually know everyone that's online. Even you can almost be more. I feel like you can be more careful online than you can in your physical space. But there's a fear with the unknown. And honestly, if a church doesn't know how to guard themselves online, they probably shouldn't be online in that space. But I think the church needs to learn how to guard themselves, because they need to understand how to protect their own teenagers and communicate and educate them for how to use the internet in a safe way, because they're using it. And I think we have to help guide them and lead them in how they use it.
Well, one of the things about CBC, people could go and, like, church leaders who happen to be checking out, Inclusion Fusion today, could take a look at your website, and it's very easy for them to say, well, it's great for a place like CBC to be doing this, or for a place like Saddleback, or a place like Life Church TV, where they have a whole team of people set up and all these incredible resources. But how would you see smaller churches being able to use this technology to expand their ministry and to reach out to those in their surrounding communities with and without disabilities?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we have grown tremendously at CBC over the last 3.5 years is how long we've been online. But we started, I had zero budget. I was the one person on staff for the role. I was given a used laptop and an internet connection. I had a Facebook page with 0 likes, and we paid $100 a month for media social. That's how much it still costs. And that includes our bandwidth. We were already recording our worship services, so it wasn't requiring any more staff man hours other than just my hours. And I just started hustling, and I just started shepherding. And so I started connecting with people that we'd push play. So we played it one time the first week. We played the service 3 times the next week, and I would shepherd those 3 services. And then we had 12, and I pastored 12 worship services. And then I realized I can't do this myself, so I recruited 12 volunteers. And then we kept starting more, and we adapted, and we grew, and we developed. But it didn't, I had zero budget for a year. We didn't spend a penny on advertising. We didn't spend a penny on new technologies. We took what we had here at the church. I took a hand-me-down laptop, and we had videos already created. We already had an internet connection here. So it can be done, and we were reaching thousands of people each week with zero budget. And so we have since invested more and grown the staff and developed further. Before I even had a budget, I was also handed an additional ministry as a young adult pastor for about 6 months. So I wasn't even full-time doing it. And we were growing and developing. And so we did have a large base because we were a large church. But I would say it's even easier now. There are tools like Google for nonprofits that help give churches free advertising. Media Social is $100 a month, or the Church Online platform is free. So you can use other tools out there. It can be a low cost. You don't have to have a lot of time invested in it to do it well. Now, I will say the more you invest in it, that we found, especially your time and energy, the more response you see. And I've seen very few churches that have really committed to it that think, oh, that's not really worth our time. What we continue to find is every church that commits to it, and their pastor, their senior pastor, leadership believes in it, they just keep wanting. They just can't believe that it's real. And our digital attendance has surpassed our physical attendance. Yet it's requiring so few resources. And our pastor just said, it's hard for me to believe this is real, but I can see it. I can see the people there. I see the interactions. And we share stories with them. And so it's any church can do this today. And I would say that wasn't necessarily the case 3 or 4 years ago. But the technology is not the limitation. I think it's the commitment to using the technology.
Well, in addition to all the other stuff you're doing, I know that you've had the opportunity to do some work with Life Without Limbs. And so, you got to know Nick Vujicic, who's just got an amazing ministry. And I'm curious from that experience how, from having, interface with someone who's such a gifted teacher and evangelist, but yet, struggles with disability, how you see the church using the available platforms and technology to be able to minister to other people with disabilities.
Yeah, so Nick, the first thing Nick would tell you is that that he doesn't struggle with disability, and that I mean he really is, I mean, just such an incredible man, and watching his passion, and so Nick has a ministry where God has blessed him to be able to go all over the world, literally, and speak to, I think he's been in 90 something countries, speaking in packed out stadiums, and God's really given him favor to reach a lot of people. Now the struggle he has is he connects with a lot of people, and then he has no way to stay connected to them. And so what I've been blessed to be able to come alongside Life Without Limbs and help them establish. So we launched Life Without Limbs TV, so essentially an online church network where we're able to play his teaching videos and some of his other videos, so people can engage with his ministry and engage in community with each other around his teaching and his videos, and then naturally using Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and these social networks that he's able to connect with that audience on an ongoing basis, and not just connect with them, but allow them to connect with each other, because so many people that Nick connects with are disabled, and so we'll hear all the time. We'll get comments and say, I had my foot amputated, and I was depressed. I saw your YouTube video, and I'm so motivated, and so God will use that video, or God will use that moment. But then what will happen is somebody else will comment and say, I had the same thing, and then they'll develop a relationship, and they'll have a conversation. And so Nick attracts or people that are just having a hard time at home, and you kind of hear his passion, and how just God has given him so much joy in what we perceive as devastating circumstances. He sees as just opportunities, and God clearly has blessed him through that time. So it's neat to see what God's doing through that ministry. Well,
one of the things that I have some personal interest in, having started out in this area of research, is folks with ADHD. And in fact, I would argue that a fair amount of what quote-unquote seeker-sensitive churches do is really accommodations to reach guys who are grown up now who didn't do well with church when they were 12 years old because of ADHD. And I thought it was really fascinating to hear you talk at the Internet Ministry Conference in Dallas about what your pastors do in terms of filming messages of different duration for the audiences that you experience online versus the folks who are, coming and, in your worship center and hearing them preach live and in person in San Antonio. And, perhaps you can talk for a minute or two about what you've learned about, communicating the gospel and teaching people about Jesus online, and how different communication styles might appeal to folks who differ in terms of their attention span or their ability to be able to process information.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that we just, the way we function at CBC, and maybe the way I function personally, is we're constant tinkers. So we're constantly making adjustments. And one of the experiments that we ran is having our pastors shorten their messages for our online church. And so they preach about 35, 40 minutes in our worship services. But when we put that online with a song, it's about 45, 50-minute service. And so we often do shorter music, or just one song to our online church services, because we have people don't just want to sit there and listen to music for 20 minutes because it doesn't engage them like it does in a physical space. And then so we had our preachers preach directly to the camera for 20 minutes, and they took out local references and just had more connection. And what we found is that, in a physical church space, somebody walks into a service, they might be bored, but they're not going to get up and walk out in the middle of it because it's just rude. Well, on the internet, people will walk out and they don't care, because nobody sees them walk out. So you have a rate at which people leave is so quick. Naturally they're finding you accidentally sometimes from a Facebook post, or they're not intending to get on the internet and watch a video for 30, 45, even 50 minutes. And so by shortening the message, we could engage them for longer. And so we found with Online Church, a 20-minute message directly to the camera engages twice as much as using the messages from our physical worship space. We've also since started recording even shorter messages that are 6 to 7 minutes that we use for Online Church on occasion, but we found those to be most engaging on YouTube and on Facebook. And so those are platforms where you're not necessarily engaging in community conversation. It's not necessarily a landing space. It's almost like a disruption. So it might show up in your news feed, or you might then just catch it on YouTube as a share. And if it's 5 minutes, I could sit and watch it. But if you accidentally found a 45-minute video, you're probably not going to sit and watch it. So having those shorter videos are really engaging. So different platforms engage people different ways. But preaching to a physical audience and preaching to an online audience are two different things. You can use those messages from a physical audience, and that's how we started for our first year. But if your pastor's willing, or even if you're willing to preach a message directly to a camera, you're going to engage that audience far more effectively than you can in the other.
Very cool. Now, one of the things that we've noticed in terms of disability ministry is that there are a lot of folks who are really willing to do something, but they get overwhelmed and it's kind of hard to know to start and like where to take the first step. So if you're a member of a church, or if you're on staff at a church, or if you're a senior pastor and watching this today, you probably already have a fair number of ministry resources that you're producing. What would be the first step that you would see that they could take in terms of using the resources that they already have at their disposal and applying them to help reach and minister to families in their communities who are impacted by disability?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is to engage on Facebook. If you're not connecting on Facebook, and what I mean by that is what we often do on social media is we tell people, come to church this weekend. Hey, come to church this weekend. Come to this event we have going on. And that doesn't work for everyone. And they might not be able to come, but you can minister to them right there in their newsfeed. And so that's where people are most engaged currently, is on Facebook. And so you can post a quick video directly to Facebook, and you can preach a message into their lives in 1 minute on Facebook. Or you can take a clip from your weekend service and just post that to Facebook. Or you can ask a question of how can we pray for you today? And that ministry moment is going to go further than anything. Honestly, when I think about everything we do at Online Church and the streaming services, our deepest community and our deepest ministry happens on our Facebook page. And so that's where I would always start is, are you engaging your audience and are you ministering to them on Facebook? Or are you just trying to get them to come to your building? And I'd say that's where online ministry really begins.
Well, that's fabulous. And we're honored to have you supporting us and serving with us as we look at some new tools for being able to minister, helping churches, connect with and minister to families who are impacted by disability. Are there any resources that, you've developed, or any other things that you would want to point people to who've been watching us today?
I love, and I'm honored to be a part of Key Ministry, so I appreciate you allowing me to be a part. My friends at lifechurch.tv are always creating great stuff. Their online church platform is fantastic, and their open resources are fantastic. Churches right now, media has really put together some great video content that churches can make available to their congregations at a really affordable price. And so I think just helping, I think we just have resources available to us now as church leaders to make available to our congregations to help them grow spiritually while they're at home, and I think it just enhances the connections we have when we come together physically. And so I think that goes for families that are impacted by disability and those that aren't. And I think we just have some valuable resources at our disposal. And Steve, I appreciate all that you're doing and what Key Ministry is doing to lead the way and really open the church's eyes to to the need, especially when it comes to families impacted by disability.
Well, Nils, thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to thank all of you, for having been part of Inclusion Fusion today. It's easy for any of you to share this with your friends, with anybody else who would have interest on the topic by just clicking the share buttons on the screen, and either through your Facebook page or through your Twitter, you can invite others to join us for the rest of the day today. We will be back again on Thursday, April 3rd, with Emily Colson, who is the author, together with her late father, Chuck Colson, of Dancing with Max, sharing as part of Autism Awareness Month. And again, we at Key Ministry are honored to be able to serve by providing free resources, to churches everywhere seeking to connect with families impacted by disability. And so feel free to share any of our resources. We're on Facebook at Key Ministry. We are on Twitter at Key Ministry. Keyministry.org is our website. And Church for Every Child, with the number 4 replacing the word for, is our blog. So again, it's been a pleasure having all of you today. It's been a pleasure having Nils join us. And check back next month for Emily Colson, and lots of cool free resources that you'll be getting from Key Ministry. Thank you.